Well, appreciate the time. Want to dig into the new music and talk about the tour, obviously, and look back a little bit, get your opinion on a couple things. But let's go back to the last album for 1 second. Shaped by Fire comes out 2019. You're out there promoting it, touring, and then bam, 2020 happens. The world shuts down. Got to go home. I imagine, after putting out an album, putting your heart and soul into it and everything, there you kind of empty the creative well. And I'm kind of curious how long it take to kind of fill that cup back up again. When did you start working on the new music? I imagine it took a few after just doing an album.
Yeah, it was a little bit demoralizing because I worked really hard to be able to get everything back off its feet, and there was 6 years where there was nothing for As I Dying, and then all of a sudden we were slowly rebuilding, and then the world shut down. So there was actually about 2 years where we sort of just hung tight, trying to figure out what's going to be next, and then eventually we just it's in my nature and Phil's nature to just be creative, and we just started sending demos back and forth, and eventually, it's what's interesting about the record we're going to release later this year, and the two singles we've done is that we actually wrote those songs about 2 years ago.
Huh.
But the relaunch in the aftermath of everything and having a couple member changes, it just sort of created some space, and maybe for just life perspective, maybe that was good for me because I'm out here on the road right now and I really appreciate what's happening, and we have an incredible connection with the fan base.
Well, I love the two new singles so far. It's interesting to learn that they're kind of the older ones on the album, and interesting too that you kind of took a writing cue from Ryan on the Cave We Fear to Enter.
Yeah, that's a first for me. Phil had written that instrumental song a couple years ago, but we didn't add vocals to it until more recently. Um, and because it was a I wouldn't call it a ballad, but for As I Dying, a little bit more on the ballad side for us, right? Like it's funny that our version of a ballad is still heavier than most music, but
Right.
but but with that said, I was like, well, Ryan, I really want to like be open to your ideas, and his I guess we should call like his scratch vocals. They were just really meaningful for him, and I didn't want to start from scratch after the scratch vocals because I felt like, hey, we've got something that really um, comes from a personal story for him. So I want to build off of that rather than start fresh.
And man, I never really thought about it till you kind of put it all together. But a cave has got to be the scariest place, the most fear you would ever have walking into somewhere. So it makes kind of perfect sense. And then, it's that whole fear, face everything and rise at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And there's a quote that inspired me, and the quote is sort of been modified to fit the song comes from like a we perspective, and the quote's not written that way, but essentially, that the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek, and I think that's a beautiful quote.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it, man. I'm so glad that you put the lyrics out there. I mean, your lyrics have always been poetry and something to read. I mean, a lot of times metal can just kind of be, getting emotions across, but I've always loved reading your lyrics, and Burden was awesome too. I'm curious, man, are we going to have a chapter 3 or a part 3 before the album comes out?
We're working on video treatment for our third single right now, and so without giving too much away, I can say this: that Burden is sort of like that really cool middle ground between heavy and melodic that As the Dying is really known for, and then the Cave We Fear to Enter is a little bit pushing more of the melodic side, like I said, almost for our range of music, slightly ballady, and then now we want to offset that by the heaviest song on the album. So I feel like that'll be a really cool way to show the diversity of the album.
I can't wait. Can't wait to hear it. And I'm just going to go out on a bold prediction here, man. It seems like every album that comes out nowadays always has features, always, guest appearances by other bands. And I'm sure you can't say, but I'm going to go out on a limb, and maybe if it hasn't happened yet, maybe I can plant that seed. And I know you're old friends, but you and Brandon Chiappetti of Bleeding Through on a track would be fire.
Yeah, it would be, and I can say that Brandon and I have worked on a lot of new stuff together because I did uh, the vocal tracking for their new album. With the new Bleeding Through album is more or less done. It's off to mixing now and stuff, and so we worked a lot together just in the studio. But in terms of features, we do have a feature coming up on this next heavy song we're releasing, but I can't announce it because I'd
Uh,
probably get in trouble.
Here's the real question, man. Be honest. With you and Brandon, if you guys were to arm wrestle, who wins?
That's a funny thing because arm wrestling is not really the same as like I don't know. Arm wrestling takes into proportions and body mechanics. I'm not gonna make a claim there because I've never been a good arm wrestler.
No.
My frame is I'm like the tall guy. I got that upside down tortilla chip thing going on a little bit, but you know, I can't really say I've been a good arm wrestler in my life.
I thought you would have had the technique, the Stallone, move the fingers and do the technique like an over the top and take him down, no problem.
Yeah, well, fun thing about that movie is the guy that drinks motor oil.
Uh,
I don't know if you remember that. That's
yeah, yeah.
that's probably one of the most ridiculous movie scenes of all time.
It's like perfect 80 cheese at its height.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And we'll get into some of that a little bit later on. Dude, let's get into the tour coming. Well, normally up the 5 freeway from San Diego to LA. I know you're out there on the road now, but coming to the Belasco Theater Thursday, August 8th in Theos, and I imagine old friends Chelsea Grin out there on the road with you.
Yeah, we've done Europe with Joseph Grin, and then we've always wanted to do the U.S. with them as well. And so, where I'm at right now while we're doing this interview is I'm on the East Coast, about to make a turn towards the West Coast here, and so we'll be out in LA pretty soon.
And dude, imagine after 7+ albums and all these decades, putting together a set list has got to be virtually impossible at this point.
Uh, I mean, the rough form that never works out exactly this way, but the rough formula is let's do at minimum 2 songs per record, and then let's try to average out at about 3. Some are 4, some are 2. And next thing you know, I got to be screaming for an hour and a half. Which is probably not exactly like a normal human activity.
And imagine the new songs are in the set too, right? The 2 new ones we got.
Well, we've been playing Burden on this tour, and then we actually we released The Cave We Fear to Enter on the same day that the tour started.
Right.
So we actually, oddly enough, we weren't really certain what the release date would be for that, and then last minute, everything kind of came together so we could get it out and promoting the tour. So we actually need to start playing that at soundcheck and then eventually move its way into the set.
Can't wait to hear it. Hopefully by LA. But dude, speaking of set list, and it's funny in talking to a lot of your brethren, the bands that you kind of came up with. I've recently talked to Atreyu, Lamb of God, Mastodon are out there on that co-headline tour celebrating the 20th anniversary of their albums. Atreyu going to be celebrating The Curse. I know a little bit early here, but would you ever do that and maybe celebrate Shadows Our Security and playing that in its entirety next year for its 20th anniversary?
I feel like somebody gave you the cheat sheet on our future plans here because you've been predicting some. Yeah, I mean, it is the 20th anniversary next year of Shadows, and that is a monumental record for the band specifically because um, Phil had joined the band while we were touring on the album cycle for Frail Words Collapse. But Shadows of Security is the first time he sort of moved into the role as like a guitar player songwriter. Prior to that, I was the singer, but I was like the guitar player songwriter in the background. And then when Phil joined the band, he was able to adapt and take over that. And of course, we shared that role, but it's really the first time that we created As the Dying as people know it now. And so I would love to do some 20th anniversary celebrations of it.
Yeah, man. I mean, going back 20 years ago when we still listened to albums in their entirety and probably during that point the CD, but nothing better than throwing on the CD and letting it roll and to be able to hear Meaning and Tragedy, into Confined, into Losing Sight, into The Darkest Nights. Like that would just be amazing to see live.
Yeah, I mean we've been talking about it. We don't have concrete plans for it, but it's definitely I feel like you and our band, we self-manage, but I feel like you're like in band manager mindset right here. You've already figured it out.
Well, I got some other ideas to get to too. Tim, I appreciate all the time and mentioned the 80s stuff earlier. Got to talk a little Austrian Death Machine with you as well, man. Quad Brutal came out. Love that album. And speaking of features we were talking about earlier, great to hear Ricky Hoover and you on Judgment Day. And talk to me about approaching him for that track. I imagine old friends with him too.
Yeah. We actually originally met doing the memorial show for Mitch from Suicide Silence, and
Right.
um, that was like an emotional time, but at the same time, it was a celebration. It was this really interesting, event, and Ricky and I had just sort of casually met back then, and then he got in touch when he was launching Of Sulfur and just asked, "Hey, would you want to do a song with us?" And and I was definitely down. And then just our friendship sort of grew from there because I would just go spend time out and hang out. And every time I'm in Las Vegas, I would sleep at his place. And, the friendship just kept growing. And then naturally, he was down to return the favor to do a song with Austrian Death Machine.
And did you approach him and say, "Hey, it's going to be Judgment Day"? Did you give him any choice in the matter?
Well, I was just like listening through the track listing, and I was trying to think what best fit Ricky, and that seemed to be to me the most like it felt like really super heavy, but also like an action movie. And I was like, all right, this is like without sounding like and there's other guys in the music industry that they're muscular and stuff like that, but generally speaking, Ricky and I are like iconic in that regard. I was like, oh, this sounds kind of cool to have these two like slightly muscular meatheady guys doing this like end of the world doom kind of thing. It's like a little bit silly as long as we're able to like poke fun at ourselves, not take ourselves too seriously.
Well, that's all that Austrian Death Machine is about, right? Is not taking yourself too seriously and having fun.
Exactly. I mean, I don't want to. I make fun of everybody, including myself, but in like a very honoring kind of way. Like anything I'm poking fun at Arnold is like in like a like if you're sitting with your best friends and you kind of roast each other, that's the
Right.
nature of it.
Right. Dude, the one thing that I was hoping would be on Quad Brutal, and maybe there's would it be Quintuple Brutal next, I guess? But
I don't know. I'm thinking about a Christmas single
ah,
coming out. Yeah.
let me plant one other seed in your brain, because the one movie that you haven't touched upon yet, which may be one of my favorite Arnold movie, it's a little bit of a later one, but I keep waiting for a end of days themed Austrian Death Machine tune.
Yeah, for whatever reason, he had a couple good one-liners, but that's like a movie that was made almost a little more seriously, and so he didn't have the like slapstick one-liners, but there's definitely a couple of them that's still in there.
Yeah, I mean, him being a drunk and like, all hung over and all schlubby and the stubble and everything.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good movie. I actually, to be honest, I sometimes forget about it because it's not like as commercially famous as his others.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, it's not in the top 10 even of the movies you think of, but it's certainly one of his later ones that was really strong. I mean, yeah, and it was a little bit more serious too, and not quite as cheesy as the 80 ones, but still a fun ride, and still get to see him in that drunk kind of asshole role, which he normally didn't play.
Yeah, for sure. It's unique. I take the challenge accepted. I will figure it out.
So when I see that on the next album, I can be like, yeah, I had something to do with
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
Tim, I appreciate all the time. Last thing I need your help with, man. We're an old school radio station. We're just up the 15 freeway from you in the Inland Empire. From San Diego speaking. And we do a feature called Mandatory Metallica every night at 10 p.m., which you're going to be a part of. And I've been having this little Metallica debate with my buddy and I, debating their greatest thrash metal album ever. And we come down on opposing sides. So I want to get your take on it. And it's really simple. It's album 2 versus 3, Ride the Lightning versus Master of Puppets. If you had to pick one out of those two, which one would it be?
It's tough because, and I noticed this from being in a band that production quality affects the way people perceive music, and so Master of Puppets to me, um, like encapsulated the thrash sound. I think James's voice was like a little bit gruffier, like and so the songs translate to me very well, and it's also nostalgic for me because it's the first. I actually heard them because of my age in a reverse order. I heard Master of Puppets first because I was too young to have heard Ride the Lightning when it came out. So I heard Master of Puppets, and then I went back and heard Ride the Lightning. So for me, that's my answer. But also like Battery is an example. I love like cymbal catches. I love like I love just like the aggressive stabs of like the cymbal catch, in the riff and stuff like that. So I feel like I've incorporated and stole that concept for so many As the Dying songs. It's just deeply ingrained in my head.
Dude, I'm totally with you. That's my thing. Cymbal chokes, like even like Damaging too. Like, oh, it's the best.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's something that's just like so aggressive about that, and it's one of the fundamental parts of the genre getting heavier over the years.
Love it, man. And yeah, and I really think that Master of Puppets, not only like you said, sounds way better than Ride the Lightning, but I think it's perfection. Like there's not a bad song on that album.
It's pretty hard to say, because I mean I love a lot of bands, but there's very few bands where I like the entire album.
And Master
Good
would
for
be one
them.
of them, though, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so good for them. And growing up, I mean, that was the most influential Metallica record for me as a metalhead. Actually, to be totally honest, the first Metallica I ever heard was Injustice for All, and then I started going back and realized that Master of Puppets was better than Injustice for All, and then I went back and I enjoyed them all. But yeah, that's the age where I'm at. Is like I first heard of them, Injustice for All.
Yeah, same as me. I figure we're pretty close in age, and I was gonna when you said Master was your entry point, I was kind of like, huh, I figured it would have been Injustice. That was the first
Yeah,
thing.
no, Master was the one that actually made me like go from like a casual fan to like a super fan, I guess.
Now comes the hard part. Now you just got to pick a song for us to play on Mandatory Metallica for you.
Uh, I mean, I because of because of the switching of thrash beats from like the upbeat to the downbeat, I love Battery. That's the example I gave, and that's what I'm going to stick with it.
Dude, I mean, you can't go wrong with that. I mean, especially after that acoustic passage and it just kicks in. Oh, so good.
Yeah, for sure.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Tim. Thank you for the time, and be looking out for that End of Days Austrian Death Machine track.
All right, sounds good. All right, man.
Credit
Thank
for
you.
that one, man. Safe travels out there on the road. Bye bye.
All right, thank you. All right, see you.